Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. All of your favorite social media platforms, we're there for you. If you search Picks and Parlays, we're usually really easy to find. The first thing that pops up, usually. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is just my name, at Chelsa Messinger, if you want to drop me a line. Before the show, all of our pickers are very animated about some scandals. That's right. On today's show, we're talking some of the big scandals going on in the sports world, whether it's Manchester City in the Premier League. Nick is really fired up about that and ready to talk about how it affects some of the gambling futures and the future of the league in general. And don't worry, we're talking a little bit about the Astros sign stealing scandal. But first, we've got to get you paid. We're talking NBA midseason awards and how to bet some of the futures on MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, and Most Improved Player. And don't worry, we've got college basketball lined up as well. San Higgs is here to talk some college hoops. Xavier St. John's, North Carolina, Notre Dame, and Iowa State and Kansas. Kansas having a great season over there. It's crazy that the Big 12, they're second place in the Big 12 right now because Baylor is the number one team in college basketball. And of course, North Carolina and Notre Dame, those two teams struggling. North Carolina, last place in the ACC. If you thought at the first of the season that we'd be saying that, I mean, I guess you should go to Vegas because I wouldn't have said that. Because every year it seems like they have talent. So I don't know what's going on with them this year. They've lost 5 in a row now. Can we get some value by playing North Carolina in this game? We'll talk to San Higgs about that. But first segment, we're talking NBA. Stick with us on Picks and Parlays. We're back after the break talking a little NBA. Back to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm your host, as always, at Chelsa Messinger is my handle on Twitter if you want to give me a shout. It's basketball season. It's actually smack dab in the middle of basketball season for the NBA. Of course, All-Star Weekend coming, going on as we speak. But we're doing a fun little segment here with Tony T where we're talking midseason awards. If the season ended today, who would get the big time hardware? MVP, Defensive Rookie of the Year, or Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, and Most Improved Player. Tony T, let's bring you in here. How you doing?
Howdy. I'm doing great. I feel good after a pretty good All-Star break and a good All-Star Saturday. Things happen for me.
Right. I guess you don't like tooting your own horn because Tony T did pretty well in picking some of those all-star competitions, 3-point competition. Buddy Hield, who was, what was he, plus 700 or plus 600?
Plus 700 in close 6, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good win. All-star, or I always want to call it the Futures game. The Rising Stars game, you picked Team USA. Team USA won. And also the dunk contest, which was a little controversial, but picked that one correctly as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Were you a little nervous
watching
yeah,
I was a little nervous on that slam dunk. Yeah, I was nervous with Buddy Hield making that comeback with making 7 of 8. Of course, Aaron Gordon, I think there was a little bit of Aaron Gordon fatigue there. Just too many, opportunities 4 times there. And of course, Derek Jones was snubbed the past few times. Thought it was his turn to shine. Of course, it helps when you have Dwayne Wade as one of the judges. So these things are judged. So you got to look at all angles when you handicap All-Star Weekend.
Right, that's a tough one when it's in the hands of somebody who's can be, is it subjective? Yes, subjective is the word I'm looking for. So this is another subjective award. Let's talk MVP and let's talk mid-season awards. If the season were to end right now, who would you like for MVP?
Yeah, now I'm going to look at this from my perspective here, which I look at both sides of the court, offensive and defensive. So I'm gonna look here at also too. I'm gonna let you guys all know I have a Western Conference bias. I mean, when you're for these players, I mean, when you're facing the likes of the Knicks, Charlotte Hornets, Atlanta Hawks, Cleveland Cavaliers, I mean, there's just so many bad. Half the teams are bad in the East. So I'm going to be really Western Conference bias here. I'm going to go with Anthony Davis here as the midseason MVP. Look what he's done for this improvement of the Lakers. They play in the Western Conference. Everybody gets up for them. They're 41-12 straight up. His odds actually are plus 2,200 to win it. I'd like the odds here with Anthony Davis. I've talked about it before. He's brought a professional culture to this team on both ends of the court. He plays very hard. He's averaging 26 points, 9 rebounds a game. Really good offensive numbers, rating 122 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. And I do respect Giannis, but half the teams are bad in the East, so I'm gonna look his way. Of course, LeBron James, I'll give an honorable mention, and Harden too, but and also Kawhi, who misses too many games. But my midseason MVP, Anthony Davis.
Right. What I would ask is, do you think the fact that LeBron's on his team hurts his chances? Because obviously LeBron's a contender as well.
That's a good question. But the thing is there isn't a whole lot of depth on that Laker team. So it's pretty much Kuzma can show up at times, and we have this talk about with the Lakers, where they don't have a lot of support for these two. But you're gonna have LeBron on the court as well. But a lot of these teams have at least 2 or 3 superstars on them, and I think. But one thing with Anthony Davis, what really stands out is his defensive ability and his work ethic. I think that's going to hold form here at the end of the season.
Right. You say the defense matters, and it does. But in the past, we've seen the award go to people that score. And James Harden fits that bill to a T. He's averaging 37 points a game. Does not play much defense. But, I mean, the stats, they're outrageous. He scores a lot of points. Especially on that Rockets team where Russell Westbrook's really not contributing as much as maybe people thought he would. Why would you not give it to James Harden? Is it just an odds thing, or?
Yeah, well, the thing is I look, again, it goes back to what you look at. And I'm looking at both sides, both ends of the court. And now with these advanced stats that calculate defensive efficiency, defensive ratings, how many points do you give up when you're on the court? Those are factors you can take into it as well. 2-point defense for the Lakers. Look at the improvement of the Lakers defensively since he's been on the court. Of course, the Rockets really had to make some major changes to that team. So I'm looking here at playing on both ends of the court, his production and the teammates around him, how well he plays. And as you mentioned about it's been well documented with Harden's defense. I just can't. It's hard for me to give an award to someone like that who doesn't play both ends of the court. And I know my standards are different than everyone else's. Everyone gets caught up in scoring. But again, in our industry, when we're handicapping games, looking for winners, you always have to factor in that defense, because poor defensive form, they're not going to give you many covers.
Here's my second question. In the age of analytics, which it's really big now, a lot of teams are big on these analytical stats. How much do you take into account analytics? Do you base it just on that alone, or does some of it go by feel? Because I'm sure there's a metric somewhere, kind of like wins above replacement in baseball, that you can judge all of these players and just give it to the player who has the best number in that category. Do we do it by that, or do we do some kind of gut feeling, or do you think it should be strictly based on numbers?
No, I think it's a combination of both here. I think you got to watch the games, and you've got to pay attention to some of the stats and the meaningful stats. And one thing I like to look at is points per possession when you're on the court, and that's something where Anthony Davis really thrives. I mean, the Lakers score an average of 122 points per 100 possessions when Anthony Davis is on the court, and that's something to look at. You also have to look at the defensive ratings. How many points do you allow when you're on your court? I think when sports betting comes into play here, when people talk about it more, I think that's when defense will be more of a focal point. I think we're probably a generation away from that happening, where people look at that stat a little bit more because their money's on it. But as gambling becomes more and more popular, I think people will start focusing more on the defensive contributions of players.
All right, so next question, Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, if you like Anthony Davis for MVP, he's a defensive guy. We saw it even in college. Do you like him for Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, that goes hand in hand with me. I'm gonna take Anthony Davis's defense. You know, when you look at him on the court, defensive rating, 101 points allowed per 100 possessions, a really solid rim protector, tireless worker, work ethic, strong. Look at the Lakers, how they improved defensively. You know, with the addition of Davis, he's been the difference. Of course, he is one of the star players, and people feed off his focus on the court. And I think he definitely lifts his teammates. Now, listen, Giannis. I have a lot of respect for Giannis, but as I qualified earlier in the segment, half the teams are bad in the East. I just cannot give the award to Giannis. When you look at the Western Conference day in, day out, it's a dogfight. We're looking at teams like Memphis, Sacramento. These teams can show up and give you a game every night. I'm definitely on that board with Anthony Davis. Now, someone to look at is Rudy Gobert. Again, he kind of falls under the radar, but when you look at his defensive rating, it's pretty good. He allows 102 points per 100 possessions, and one thing to note, he's got a very high offensive rating, so he's someone to look at. But the problem with Utah is this team has just been a streaky team. They have spells of very poor defensive play, and that's gonna hurt Gobert's chances in this category.
All right, so we've talked a lot about MVP, and now we only have a minute left. Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, Most Improved Player, go.
Yeah, I like, obviously, Jay Morant here for the Memphis Grizzlies. The team is a winning team. He's averaging 17 points, but I like the fact that he's making 49% of his shots for a rookie. That's amazing here. I'm with John Morant here. Most improved, I'm going to go to Luka Doncic, near 29 points per game, which is 8 points greater than his rookie season. Coach of the Year, Nick Nurse, Toronto Raptors. People thought the Raptors were going to dive. No, the team is competitive, could be a contender for the Eastern Conference. No Kawhi, but I'm telling you, this team plays very well and you got to credit Nurse's contributions there as head coach.
All right, thanks Tony T for joining us, and his picks were red hot for All-Star Weekend, so you better listen to him. We're back after the break talking soccer with Nick Geber on Picks and Parlays. Welcome back to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network, and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you search Picks and Parlays, we're really easy to find. If you want to give us a shout or, watch any of our content on any of those platforms. And also, you can go to picksandparlays.net. We've got all kinds of stuff there as well. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. You can find me on Twitter at Chelsa Messinger. It's my handle. It's my name if you want to give me a shout. Right now, we are talking scandal in the Premier League with Nick Geber. Nick, are you ready to talk some scandal with this Manchester City bombshell?
That's right, Chelsea. I'm always ready to talk football. You know what I mean? I mean the real football, the one that the rest of the world plays, follows, loves, adores. You know what I'm talking about, Chelsea. The beautiful game, the Jogo Bonito. Let's talk football. Huge scandal, of course, you're talking about it. Manchester City Football Club, Chelsea, they are the repeat English Premier League champions, have been found guilty by UEFA, which is the European soccer governing body, the second most powerful governing body in all of soccer, with the exception of FIFA itself. They have been found guilty of violating financial fair play rules. Now, I know people listening to this and rolling their eyes. Two things. Well, soccer, oh man, that's one. And then financial fair play.
American accent.
Yeah, what is that? Well, financial fair play is really important because what happened a number of years ago, especially as the Soviet Union crumbled and all this massive amounts of money started coming out of the Soviet Union with the oligarchs and Middle Eastern money coming in, people started coming in and just buying football clubs around Europe and putting billions of dollars into them. And when I say billions, I mean it. Like Roman Abramovich, an oligarch from Russia, bought Chelsea Football Club, bought them basically out of bankruptcy, and just started plowing in enormous amounts of money. And, of course, they started winning the league year in and year out because they were buying all the top players. I hope that tastes good, Chelsea. Buying all the top players. And better have something a little stronger in there. But a number of clubs have done this. Manchester City went from relative obscurity outside of England into a big global brand because they were bought by Sheikh Mansour, who is a Middle Eastern gentleman, as I'm sure you can imagine, with a name like Sheikh Mansour. But he bought Manchester City Football Club and plowed billions of dollars into them, literally. And what happened as a result of that is they brought in financial fair play rules. By the way, his name's Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and I know we just call him, we call him Bill, but that's just the way it goes. But he is with the Emirates, and so they put in rules basically to close the door after this has already happened. So basically they're saying, now you have to spend money in a reasonable manner. You can't just go crazy. It has to be related to how much overall global revenue you bring in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what this bloke was doing was basically skirting the rules because Emirates, the Etihad, which is his airline that he owns, is the primary sponsor of Manchester City. So when he needed money to buy new players and cheat, basically, what they did is they just pumped up the sponsorship for Etihad. So the Sheikh would give Etihad the money, and Etihad would give the money to Manchester City in guise of a sponsorship. Of course, that's cheating. Etihad, an airline that's apparently giving back 60 of its planes because it can't turn a profit, is unlikely to be plowing billions of dollars into advertising. So it was a German magazine, Der Spiegel, found this out. Der Spiegel, I know it sounds pretty nasty, but there is a cure for that now. Der Spiegel is a very famous German magazine, by the way. They found this out, expose. Anyway, bottom line, long story short, I know it's still been a long story even though I said it was short. What has happened is that UEFA have fined Manchester City £25 million, which is nothing, because they've banned them from all European competition for 2 years. No Champions League. Now, to give you an idea, Man City are planning on winning the Champions League the next 2 years. Liverpool last year for winning the Champions League got £150 million. So you're talking about a £300 million, about a $420 million a year windfall that Manchester City will now not get for the next 2 years. Their players' contracts are going to be null and void. The manager, Pep Guardiola, very probably considered one of the two best managers in the world right now, he's likely going to leave. This club will not be able to recruit players. It is a disaster. One of the huge clubs in Europe has the potential here to be totally gutted, Chelsea. Now, you're going to ask me the obvious question. I'm going to let you answer it. Ask me, Nick, how does this affect betting? Go ahead. I'm waiting.
So, Nick, how does this affect betting?
Well, funny you should ask that, Chelsea. Funny you should ask that. Because, to give you an example, Manchester City are playing West Ham United on Wednesday in a match that they will no doubt win because they're still a great team with all their great players there. But the opening odds for this, Manchester City were minus 1,250 favorites. That's 12.5 to 1 favorites to win this game. They are now minus 714 favorites. The odds have almost been halved since this came out, with the odds makers thinking maybe these players are thinking, hey, I'm done with this BS, I'm gonzo. So it is possible, and then West Ham United need a win, as we'll talk about in a second here. So this is a huge, huge scandal, Chelsea. It's going to rock the global sports stage. And we'll have to see what happens and how it affects betting. But shall we get on to some of my Premier League future picks here? Because there is one that relates here, and that is the top 4 position. Should we talk about it?
Yes, let's do it. Because just a shout out to the viewers. Nick's made me some money. A lot of these draws have been hitting, so you need to listen to them.
Unfortunately, we didn't get the Newcastle draw today. They got murdered 4-0 by Arsenal, which is a complete shocker. I had to do a double take. I thought maybe I was in some sort of wicked nightmare. But in fact, Arsenal did manage to score 4 goals. It was at home. But let's talk about that another time. Let's talk about the Champions League spots, because the way this works is the top 4 teams in the Premier League go to the Champions League, and that is what you play for to win if you're not going to win trophies or the league title. So Liverpool are top. They are 1 in 1,000. Okay, they're going to win the league. They're 25 points clear of Manchester City. They're likely going to set all sorts of records. I think we spoke about this last week. It feels like last year, Chelsea, honestly, but it's last week.
And that's your team, so I hear about it all the time.
Yeah, Manchester City is going to be right behind them, also at 1 in 1,000, because no one, quite honestly, is catching Manchester City, at least unless they get a 25-point league reduction, which is some discussion about that, but that likely will come next year and not this year. By the way, some of the other ramifications of that are, of course, that it's going to probably solidify Liverpool's dominance in the Premier League over the next few years, so we can talk about that another time. But Man City are second. And that's not going to change 1 in 1,000. However, third place, Leicester City, they're 1 in 100. Okay, they are currently 9 points above fourth place Chelsea. I don't see Leicester City dropping out of the top 4. But fourth place Chelsea Football Club are 41 points. Now, Tottenham Hotspur also have 40 points, and Sheffield United have 39 points. I'm going to suggest to you that any one of those 3 teams could nick a top 4 position here. All right? But if you look right now at the value, Chelsea are 1 in 10, not great value there. Tottenham Hotspur are 4 in 11, not great value there. But Sheffield United, Chelsea, the newly promoted team to the Premier League this year, been playing some crackingly wonderful football, exciting stuff. I mean, they've got 3 wins, a loss and a draw in their last 5. They've got 2 wins in a row. They beat Bournemouth, they beat Crystal Palace, and earlier on they beat West Ham United. I think if there is a dark horse here, Chelsea, I would take Sheffield United at 14-1 for a top 4 finish. If you want to make a little wager, don't count Sheffield United out. This team can play. I like them 14-1. I'd certainly put some money on that, Chelsea. There's a little pixie for you there.
Right, and they're a team that newly bumped up, correct? So that would be huge.
Correct, and the other 2 promoted
That's why the odds are probably
awful.
like that.
Yeah, right. So that's why, and they're shocking. I mean, you can remember Leicester City about 3 years ago won the Premier League, and that was what was that, 1,000-1 or something ridiculous like that before the league started. These things can and do happen. Let's go on the other end of the table, though, to the relegation battle. Of course, wouldn't it be wonderful in the NFL to see the worst 3 teams bumped to the XFL and the 3 best teams in the XFL promoted to the NFL? Wouldn't that be fun to watch? Well, that's what we have, obviously, in the Premier League. Bottom 3 teams right now, West Ham United, Watford, and Norwich City. That's where we are in the table today. In terms of relegation, Norwich are sheer favourites to go down. They're 1 in 16. No value there. They are for sure going to take the long drop to the Championship. Aston Villa, though, they are second place at 4-5. Bournemouth are 5-4, and West Ham United are 5-4 as well. Everyone thinks Watford will get out. They're 7-4. I think they will, Chelsea. My pick for relegation is Norwich, Bournemouth, and at 5-4, you got to take David Moyes and West Ham United because they suck.
To put it bluntly, we've got about a minute left. Let's talk managers. Let's talk the sack race and just some of these manager jobs that are opening up. What are some of the jobs that are opening up, and who do you think is going to get sacked?
Well, right now, Chelsea, Roy Hodgson is 3-1 favourite to get the sack next. He's the manager of Crystal Palace. Unky Roy, we call him. He's a nice old bastard, a good man. But I actually don't think Roy Hodgson's going to get the sack. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man United is right behind at 4-1. I can say he's made some certain noises about making the Champions League this year because now their 5th place is going to be open. The 5th place will be open to the Champions League this year because of the situation with Manchester City. It's going to get interesting, but I still don't think they're going to sack Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I actually think the next manager to go, you ready for this? Could well be Pep Guardiola. He's 10-1 right now. He is a manager of Manchester City Football Club, and I think if his players walk and there's no Champions League next year, I think Pep Guardiola hands in his ticket right now.
All right, always good soccer talk with Nick Geber. When we get back from the break, we're talking more basketball, college basketball this time with San Higgs. Thanks again, Nick Geber, for joining us. Cheerio.
Cheers,
We'll be back after the break.
5 seconds.
Back on Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network. Also streaming on social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. We're probably there. If you want to search Picks and Parlays, we're really easy to find. Or you can head to our website, picksandparlays.net, for all of your sports betting needs. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. Let's dive into some college basketball because it's been a long show. We need to get some college basketball. We're talking college hoops with San Higgs. Sean, can you hear me? How are you? What have you been up to?
I hear you. Well, listen to Nick here talking about like Dosh Peagle, or I thought he said like Regal Beagle. I thought he was talking about Three's Company or something, like a classic American television. I was like, oh, the Regal Beagle. Yeah, I could get into a little Mr. Furley action. What's happening here on the show? I didn't. Then it went into soccer or something. I don't know what happened then.
There's definitely, he usually throws in a few words that I don't know what they mean, and I just kind of smile and nod because I think they're English slang or something. But I digress. Let's talk college basketball, which you've been
I like
pretty
how you
good
hit him with a
lately.
Cheerio at the end.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
well, he has all. Nick, for the viewers
Cheerio.
who do not know at home, has all these different voices and accents that he likes to do before the show. We all laugh about it, so that's where that came from. But I digress. Back to college hoops. You've been doing pretty well so far. Tell me about it.
3-0 last week. 3-0 last week on a show. It's gonna be tough to top that one. So I don't know what we're gonna do. Maybe we gotta hit all the sides today too. Go 6-0. I don't know. But we got 3 winners locked in. We got 3 more though. We'll get on it.
Yeah, we've got to at least try, right? Let's start with Xavier St. John's, and let me get to my notes. Xavier favorite in this one, -1.5. Total sits at 141. Xavier 16-9 on the year, 9-14-2 against the number. St. John's 14-11, 14-9-2 against the spread. What do we like in this one? This one's at Madison Square Garden as well. Xavier's one of those teams that's on the bubble to make the NCAA tournament, so they're going to be at least trying to play well. Who do we like in this one?
Yeah, they're clearly on a bubble. They're in there with the loss to Butler, and I look at this line at 1.5. I'm just shaking my head because I look at they win at DePaul by 8. They beat Seton Hall by 12. They beat Creighton handily, double digits. Marquette the same way. And yet here against St. John's, a low 1.5 number. It's one of those games where it just really doesn't make sense to me. Herron's out for St. John's. He's their leading scorer. And I get, a guy goes down, other people come up. But, this is a team, you mentioned their ATS record, hot out of the gate with their new coach. But then league play starts and, all your ugly words come out to show when you're playing against your Novas and your Cranes, Xaviers, who've won 10 straight over St. John's. But I got to say, the last time they played, St. John's forced them into 19 turnovers. Again, didn't translate into a win, but if you're going to be sloppy like that here on the road, that's the only reason I can see this line being 1.5. It's like one of those too good to be true lines. I'm taking a home dog here. This is like it's MSG, but let's be honest. St. John's plays all their marquee games here. This is a home game for them. Xavier will be back for the Big East tournament in a couple weeks, but I don't know. I'm calling St. John's here. I know they're bubble Xavier. They need to win off already a loss on the road here, but this line just tells me St. John's is going to win this one here. I got 1.5, whatever. I'll take a money line plus 110. I'm taking St. John's. It just makes no sense to me why they're 3-9 in Big East play, and it's whatever. It's like Duke last week. That line was 8.5. We're like, why is this line so high? Florida State's a top 10 team. We're looking at, and it was a battle. Florida State was there the whole game, and this is a team that's probably NCAA bound versus a team that's heading to the NIT if they're lucky. I can't.
Right.
Whatever. It's one of those St. John's. St. John's are nothing.
It definitely looks a little strange to me because their last meeting, Xavier won that one 75-67, and they were an 8-point favorite. Obviously, it was at Xavier, so obviously St. John's will get some credit for being at home, even though it's a neutral court. But the only stat that jumped out to me is St. John's was only 1 for 16 from the 3-point line. So maybe if they shoot even a little better, they can contend because obviously, hopefully they're not going to do that again. I would assume.
Well, that's one. How much worse you get for 116 when you go two for 24 on your own home floor? So, yeah, again, you couple that with if they're good, St. John's gonna have to press. They got to force turnovers. That's their game. And if you shoot a little better, you shoot 30%, then 10%. That should translate into a win for you. Again, you mentioned the line 8.5 down to 1 here on a neutral. We'll call it. But
right,
again, shady line stuff here. It makes no sense to me. I'm going St. John's. It's whatever. Low-hanging fruit, you could go the other way, think it's easy money. There's never easy money to be made. Everything's a struggle. St. John's, the Johnnies, the Redmen. I don't even know what they're called anymore.
They're the Red Storm, I believe. I think. Let's move
the
on.
Johnnies
to
St. John's Johnnies.
The Johnnies. That would be too easy. Let's move on to North Carolina and Notre Dame, two of these teams in the ACC that have been struggling this season. UNC is on a 5-game losing streak. They're at the bottom of the ACC, which is not normal for the Tar Heels. Obviously, they'd want to turn it around, and maybe they could make it to the tournament. Right now, it's not looking like it. UNC 10-15, 9-16 against the number. Notre Dame is favored in this one, -4.5, probably because it's at Notre Dame. Total is 147.5. Notre Dame 15-10 against the spread, and that's also their record. 6-1 against the number in their last 7. Last meeting, UNC won that one 76-65 as 9.5 point home favorites. So this is another one where the line has shifted a lot. Obviously, North Carolina is not having the season that everyone thought they would, but 4.5 to a North Carolina team that still has a lot of talent. Do you like Notre Dame here, or do you like the Tar Heels?
You mentioned that opening game that was opening night. They were 9.5, 10-point favorite, and were ranked in the top 10 at the time, North Carolina. Right. So times have definitely changed. And I mean, 10-15. How can we even think about that? Are they going to put together a run in the ACC tournament to make the NCAAs? If they're lucky, maybe they'll get an NIT invite just because they're North Carolina. But if they're going to be under 500, I can't even see that. And you thought maybe they turned the corner. They had a close loss to BC, 71-70, and then they reeled off the 2 big wins over Miami and NC State. And I had NC State that game. I was like, no way, they scored 90 points. That's an anomaly. And then they proceed to lose 5 straight, although they nearly knocked off Duke in that game. But I'm going to lay the 4 here with Notre Dame. I know they're not anything great by any means. I mean, 3-point games. Louisville 4-point, Georgia Tech 2 to Syracuse, FSU by 1. So they just lost OT to Virginia by points. So they're in ugly games all the time. And talent wise, listen, North Carolina is probably a top 5 recruiting talent team every year, but I'm going to lay the 4. This North Carolina team, even with Anthony back, he's averaging about 20 points games the last 4 games. Hasn't helped him much. Well, I'll take the 4. I mean, let's go Notre Dame here at home. North Carolina, it's just a bad year.
Right, and the issue with Carolina is the fact that they haven't been able to close out games. Their last 4 home losses have been by a total of 8 points. That's a dagger, especially if you watch that Duke game. They let that game slip out of their hands. They should have won that twice, and they didn't. So that's why
you can't hit a free throw. They can't hit free throws. They're shooting 41%. The crazy thing is, I think they're getting like 42 rebounds a game in ACC play. I mean, that's insane. But when you're missing 60% of your own shots, I guess it's easy to get 40-something rebounds a game. If they could, you're talking like 3 shots a game, their whole record would be different. They could be easily 18-6 as opposed to 15-10 or something, or 10-15, excuse me. So, right. I mean, are they going to start falling? I mean, that's what we're betting on, that they're going to be able to start closing out games now, in mid-February. That's when they're going to turn it around. It's like baseball. You can't bet on like losing streaks like that. You just can't just some losing teams. I mean, 5 in a row and they haven't looked good all season. 10 wins on the year. That's not North Carolina Tar Heel basketball. Listen, if you don't want to play it, you walk away. You don't have to take Notre Dame. You don't have to play the game. We got other games on the board. We got the, right. But I take Notre Dame. I can't just back the loser like that. They've just been, it's just you don't know what you're getting. Hurt players.
Right. The only reason I would ever take North Carolina is the fact that their luck's got to turn sometime, I would assume, because as I mentioned, they do have talent. Baycott's good down low. Cole Anthony, who was out for part of the season. So that does give him an excuse to be bad. Their leading scorer was out for some of those games. But yeah, it's kind of like in craps. You either ride the hot hand, or if you see something the opposite way, you go the opposite way. Like if it's hot on 7, just don't put your chips out there.
Yeah, that's good advice. 7.
Right.
7's a winner.
No, 7's not a winner.
On the first roll. On the first roll, it is.
Yeah, the first roll, that's it. Or unless if you play the don't pass line, which I hate when people do.
Like that.
I will leave the table if people are playing that, because obviously it's the best odds, but it's just not any fun, and I hate when people do that. So
I say it all the time, like if I just played a don't pass line, I'd make money, right? Because the casino has to make money, but play the don't pass line.
Yeah, but people get mad, and it's fun to celebrate with everybody else. So that's our craps talk for picks and parlays. Sorry if you guys don't play craps. You should get into it. It's very addicting.
Oh, I think I built one of the towers at Trop in Atlantic City playing. I should say playing. I wasn't playing. If I was playing, I'd be winning. It was terrible. Forget craps talk. I'll move on. Jesus God.
I like the electronic craps where you can just sit there and lose money and at least get free drinks, but you can bet like dollar bets, so that's fun. All right, so let's move on to basketball. Iowa State, Kansas. Kansas big favorites in this one, minus 15.5. Total is 141. Iowa State is without Tyrese Halliburton, out for the season with a wrist injury. He's an NBA projected lottery pick, so that's a big loss for Iowa State. They're 11-14 on the year, 12-13 against the spread. Kansas 22-3. That's right, they've only lost 3 games, but somehow they're still in second place in the Big 12 because of Baylor, but just 15-10 against the spread. So who do we like in this one?
Yeah, you just mentioned high burnout. Leading scorer, already a thin bench. And let's remember, Iowa State beat these guys twice last year. And what happened first meeting? In Iowa State, Kansas came out and trucked them by 26. Again, we could say it's a look ahead. You got Baylor on Saturday here. You're laying 15, 16 points, whatever the case would be. But I'm going to lay with Kansas. I think they're going to stick it to them again. I just don't think Iowa State has the horses to keep up. And I'm going to say maybe even the over here in this game, too. We'll look at the 141. Most of my predictions are in a 145 type range. So I'm going to go Kansas. It's a heavy number, yes. And, I don't like really laying double digits like this. But listen, Kansas is good. They're trying to get a 1 seed themselves with Baylor, with Gonzaga and San Diego State. So they got stuff to play for. And they need a big convincing win, between these NET ratings and stuff like that. So we'll go lay it 15.5. And we're going to go over to 141 also here. Why not? A little bonus play here for us on the
little sprinkle.
Big 12 action. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only reason I would not take Kansas here is because it's a very classic look ahead game. Their next game is Baylor.
But it's Monday.
It's
Monday to Saturday. It's Monday to Saturday. We got time. If it was like a Thursday game or something closer to the weekend, you'd be like, oh, it's right. They got all week to take care of that. It's Monday. The rankings are coming out. They got to come out and jump on them. So if it was later in the week, I'd be worried about it. Not here. Not on a Monday.
All right, Sean, thanks for joining us. As always, we hope we go 3-0 again this week.
Yes.
We're back after the break with more picks and parlays. Recap with us after the break. Welcome back to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you search Picks and Parlays, you'll probably find us. We're really easy to find at Picks and Parlays or at Picks Parlays on Twitter if you want to give us a shout there. I'm on Twitter as well. I'm at Chelsa Messinger if you want to give me a shout. Now it's time to recap all of today's picks. In case you weren't listening, in case you weren't paying attention, or if you're just now joining us, don't worry, we've got you covered. Tony T came on to talk about NBA midseason awards for the MVP. He likes Anthony Davis, who's also a pretty good value pick as far as the futures go. Defensive Player of the Year, also Anthony Davis. Rookie of the Year, he likes Ja Morant. For the Grizz, he's certainly very fun to watch. Most Improved, Luka Doncic, who also very fun to watch and has had an incredible year this season with the Mavs. Moving on to Nick Geber, EPL Futures, top 4. He liked Liverpool, a big favorite there. Manchester City, Leicester City, and Chelsea. But his long shot, Sheffield United at 14-1, a big value play there just because it's their first year. They just got bumped up. So that would be an incredible story. Relegation the opposite way. Norwich, Bournemouth, West Ham. Those are the ones he likes to move down. And then finally, we talked about college basketball with San Higgs. Xavier St. John's. He's taken St. John's at +1.5. UNC at Notre Dame, taking Notre Dame -4 at home. Iowa State at Kansas, taking Kansas to lay that big number, -15.5. Hopefully, they're not looking ahead too far because they do play Baylor, the #1 team in the country, next. So they've got a statement to make, at least for betting purposes. Thanks for joining us. That's it for our show on Picks and Parlays. We're here every weekday if you want to join us. We're back tomorrow with more sports betting goodness on Picks and Parlays. See ya.